Hi everyone. I'm hopping in real quick because I recorded this a while ago and it's also me diving into my own personal trauma, so I wanted to attach a little bit of a trigger warning before we dive into this episode. I'm editing it now. Hopefully you guys enjoy, but just be aware I do go over some tough subjects, so proceed with caution. Okay, bye-bye. Enjoy the episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Show Up with Camron Gran. Before we dive in today, I want to take a moment to remind you all that I am not a therapist. I am just somebody going on his own mental health journey, giving you little tools, tricks, tips, anything that you might use on your own journey. You can try them, you cannot. It's up to you. Only you know what works for you, and I just want to make sure I advocate for that because you can definitely try anything I do, but you need to make sure that you find out what's best for you. And the only way to find that out is by trying. On this week's episode, it's not about teaching, it's about me trying to push and learn myself. So I've been trying to find topics that I need help working on. Definitely one of the things that I'm doing this week is I'm going to go over the talk that's called The Gift and Power of Emotional Courage by Susan David. It's a TED Talk. I'm going to be doing those a lot lately because ever since I watched Brene Brown's TED Talk, I found out that they really help push me and make me find new ways to actually relate to just the human experience. And it also helps me recognize when it is important to get out of my own head. Sometimes we're all wrapped up in our own stuff that we forget to kind of leave our brains behind. Obviously, you can't literally do that because if you left your brain behind, you wouldn't be alive anymore. What I'm talking about is going with the flow. I've been doing these once a month. I hope that you guys find them and you guys actually enjoy them. I love doing this show for you guys. Show Up with Cameron Gran has really helped me not only be accountable for my own mental health, but also to recognize the power of just showing other people that it's okay if they're not okay. There's power in recognizing that. We put expectations on ourselves, and that can really lead us into trouble. Really, all of what we need to do in our own lives is make sure that we are happy, make sure that we're doing the things to make not only us, but everyone around us happy. But always make sure that you are doing what's best for you first, because again, you can't help other people if you don't help yourself first, because we only have so much energy to give, and you need to have the excess energy go to other people. If you give all your energy to other people, that's when things can go wrong. And just because I don't know if I've said it in a while, I want to make sure that if you are struggling in a serious way, I don't mind if you watch this to help you get through the high peaks areas of your life. But if you're thinking of suicide, if you're thinking of anything seriously like that, make sure you call the prevention hotline, just because I know how hard it is to get help. But I want to make sure everyone knows that you don't have to wait for the actual moment of doing it to find help. Usually what's happening when we feel overwhelmed with that is we've lost the ability to find what's going on in our brains, so it feels like it's helpless. A lot of times those hotlines and people that they can connect you with on those hotlines will find a way for you to get through what you're doing right now so that you can get into a place to actually start working and make yourself better. But now that we've done our spiel, I'm going to dive into the TED Talk. I hope you guys enjoy this. I certainly enjoy watching and bringing my opinions to it. It's a little bit of a little break for me because the other 3 weeks of Show Up with Cameron Gran are all about, helping you. Even the 1 week where it's just about giving you a broad idea of what's going on, I decided that I really wanted to make sure that I definitely walk the walk if I'm going to talk the talk. If I'm going to advocate for you guys to work on your mental health, I want to make sure that I'm doing the same work. You know what I'm saying? I don't like hypocrisy. Nothing that I'm going to tell you to do is not something I've tried. I have even talked about some skills that I have tried and not used myself, but just because a skill doesn't work for me doesn't mean it won't work for you. That's kind of the magic and power of just working and advocating for your own mental health. It's the fact that you have enough awareness to know what works for you and what doesn't. Let's begin.
In South Africa, where I come from, sawubona is the Zulu word for hello. There's a beautiful and powerful intention behind the word because sawubona literally translated, I see you, and by seeing you, I bring you into being.
Right off the bat, I have to pause it because she's from South Africa and she talks about the word sawubona, it sounded like she said, and now it's a greeting in South Africa, which means hello, but it literally translates to I see you, and by seeing you, I bring you into being. And let me just say, nothing has made me cry more than the moment in Avatar 2, The Way of Water, when Jake takes his son by the head and just says, I see you. Oh man, I just bawling because it's so rare for somebody to see you as the real person that who you are and not the, again, person that we build up other people to be in our heads. And so we don't have this greeting. Hello does not mean anything as beautiful as that. But yeah, sorry, I was like, wow, we just started and I always want to cry because that's such a rare thing to find people who see you. That's why I only have 5 5 friends that I consider close friends to me, because I definitely have met people and we talk and we're acquaintances, but they don't see me for my real self. And usually you can tell somebody sees you because they know what you will and won't do. They have no question about you and they just know you. I don't know how else to define it. It's very much, I knew somebody so well that we could just look at each other and communicate, and that was a friend. And it was just so rare, especially also so fun because we were in band class and we weren't allowed to talk. We'd have entire conversations just purely based on looks that we were sharing with each other. I could always tell based on the reaction that they knew what I was thinking. So that's a rare thing with people to find. Sorry, I had to pause just to marvel at the beauty of that sentiment.
Denial that makes 50 years of racist legislation possible while people convince themselves that they are doing nothing wrong.
Currently, she's going over denial and the power of denial, and the fact that I guess in her country there is a huge racial boom going on, and where everyone thought that it would never happen there, but because everyone was in denial, it happened right underneath their nose. And I feel like that's just speaks about everything on all walks of life. The more we deny what's happening in front of us, the more you give power to something because it feels like it's moving in the shadows. It's kind of like the whole premise of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix is the fact that everyone is in denial about the fact that Voldemort came back, even though they have a witness who they all trusted and all like had such respect before. But because none of them want to believe this truth, the entire country and entire like world is in denial that Voldemort could possibly come back. Exactly the kind of thing that he thrived on, and why he did so much bad things in that year span, because nobody was taking the fact that he returned seriously. And that's kind of the same thing as like in life, the more we deny something, the more it gives power. For instance, it took me a long time to recognize the fact that my mother was doing drugs, and it wasn't until literally something happened that I was like, there is no way any friend would come over like this and leave in this way. Something's sketchy going on. It's the fact that my mother was trying to convince me that it was just a normal behavior. Gaslighting. She was trying to gaslight me to think that that was natural and normal, but that's when I was like, okay, she's definitely doing I had 2 things in mind. Either she was drug dealing or she was somehow also a prostitute. I don't know if that was ever the case. I never asked her about it, but it's just one of those things where I'm like, it shouldn't have taken that for me to recognize that she was doing those things, because there were so many signs beforehand. But obviously you have a filter when it comes to the term mom, and you're like, no one wants to believe that their mom is capable of that kind of thing. And so because of that, it grew to this point. And then denial being the fact that, I don't know if I've said this part of the story, but her passing away, but I was supposed to call my mother and we were supposed to talk the day she died. I got upset because I haven't spoken to my sister like in a very long time, because I left Washington because of her, but I wanted to make sure that she knew that I still cared about her. So I wanted to check in with her. So I had the phone call with my sister, and then I could tell that my sister was still using. So then I was talking to my mother and I wanted to ask her that question to make sure that she's okay. Because last time we spoke, she told me that she wasn't. And then I was like, okay, she doesn't live with my sister. They were just like meetings. So I didn't want to like get in the middle of them catching up with each other. My last thought before I hung up was, I need to ask my mother whether or not she's still using, because there are a lot of medical things that she should worry about if she is. I was like, okay, I'll call you later that night. She didn't answer, and then got to like the next day or a couple days later and she passed away. And my last thought was, she passed away from an overdose, and I had a lot of guilt from the fact that I didn't just keep calling even though she didn't answer that first time. I don't feel like that phone call would have changed anything, because we like to believe that when we call somebody out on a behavior that they'll change, but addiction normally isn't that simple. But that moment with my mother on the phone was me trying to be in denial that she was using again. And that's kind of where this relates to, is like my denial is what gave, in my head, it gave not enough time to actually make my mother try to get clean again. If she was, I don't know if she was lying to me about that, but it's one of those things. The reason why I know that I can't open the door completely to my sister until she talks to me about her journey and like openly, and as like telling me everything the steps she's doing to get clean, is because I know unless she's talking in those terms, that all that she's telling me when she's saying she's going to get clean is just words she thinks I want to hear. And I don't talk just to talk. I talk because I want to actually get to the real issue at hand, and so I can address it and then move forward. But I have pushed my sister to talk to me about what's wrong, why is she using, what is pushing her to do that, aside from the addiction of it. And usually that push is because she's trying to block something out. Sorry, this is more than I think you were aware I was going to talk about this, but just all these things are kind of ruminating in my mind. But as I said, these are to kind of push me to keep going with my own journey, not just to share these talks with you. So let's continue with our talk about denial.
I was the master of being okay.
Sorry, I had to take a breath because she just said, I became the master of being okay. Anyone out there who knows what it's like to recognize the fact that even though everyone in your family is struggling, they come to you when they struggle. They don't allow you to come to them. So you have to basically put on a face with all the people in your life so your burden doesn't become theirs. And while they're supposedly getting better, they don't realize that you're sinking further into being not okay. But you say, you're okay, you're fine. And it's because there's a thing where we ask questions, but we don't actually care about the other people's real answer. We only care about ourselves. And on this note, I would encourage you, if you ever find yourself saying the word, are you okay? Are you doing fine? How are things going? Don't ask those things, even though it seems like it's a normal social thing to say. Don't ask those things if you're not willing to have the conversation to actually bridge whatever that might bring up in somebody. So maybe say, how was your weekend? Did you enjoy the weather? Like, if you're going to be very abstract and not want to actually give time to something, I would caution by saying, are you okay? Because it can hurt to realize that you've been putting on a face with everybody because it feels like nobody actually cares about the truth of whether or not you are okay. And the fact is, she said that she was putting on an okay face because her father was slipping away from cancer. And again, 2 times in this conversation, I get what she means, because my dad wasn't fading away from cancer. My dad had an issue with, I believe it was his gallbladder, and then he was getting better, but then there was an air pocket that formed. And because of that air pocket, he had some kind of, I don't know if it was a seizure, but basically he ended up in the hospital. And then the entire time I kept asking my family if I should come home, and they kept telling me no, to wait till he got better, because eventually he was conscious again. He was talking. Oh, he had a stroke because he was relearning how to talk. And then they're like, no, he's doing fine. He's getting better. We would rather you come home and when you can actually speak to him and it can be very positive. And then I kept asking people, I was like, are we sure he's going to get better? Are you guys going to call me if it looks like he's not going to? But this is my mistake because I am a check-in person. The rest of my family is not. They would rather pretend to be okay or pretend to be, or you know what, denial, because they're talking about it. They'd rather be in denial about truth than tell me what's actually happening. So the last conversation I had with my dad was through FaceTime. I could tell he had gotten worse because before he was able to actually make words, but not even full words. He was able to make sounds that were similar to the tone of a word, but he was able to mouth the words to you. He mouthed the word, I love you, but he didn't make the sound. And that's when I was like, okay, let me ask him again if I should come home or not, because that seems like he went backwards, not forward. And then he kept telling me he was fine, just to wait until the end of the summer. This is the year I was filming The Flyaway Girl. And even they were like, do you want to put filming on pause? And I was like, no, because it's helped me distract myself from what's going on with my dad. I'll go home when my family tells me to. And then he got worse, and then he passed away, and then I did go home. I had already finished the film, but yeah, so that's why I say I recognize what she's saying, where she said goodbye without really realizing what that would be the last time they spoke and went about what she was normally doing in her day. So I completely get that feeling because I would have done things differently. I don't know if our relationship would have gotten better because I've spoken about this before, where I kind of had to remove my anger from myself because I realized the anger was just attached to something that I would never in this lifetime have the opportunity to cleanse myself of, because my father gaslit me anytime I tried speaking about the way he treated me as a child into trying to make me believe that these things didn't happen. Because even if I don't remember something, reality is if somebody else is talking to me, if I don't remember what they're talking about, I can say, I don't remember this, but go on because I want to hear about your experience. And I don't like when people are like, well, I'm not going to apologize because I don't remember that part. And I was like, well, first off, it doesn't really matter to me whether or not I remember. It's more of, who is this person talking to me? Is this someone likely to make something up for no reason? Or is this somebody who loves me and I've hurt them? If I've hurt them and they're not somebody likely to make up things for attention, I should take them at their word. And you can preface this saying, I don't remember this, but I am sorry that something I don't remember caused you so much pain. I wish that I had known about it so I could have taken steps to prevent those things from happening to you again in the future. Because then you're hearing somebody, taking them as they are, and acknowledging that we all can cause somebody pain even without recognizing it. And that was kind of the thing that I was being bitter about with my dad, is he never gave me the opportunity to just speak my truth. And all those "are you okay?" is I said yes, I'm fine, to never got to actually have their moment to be expressed and then actually be let go organically. And that made me kind of sad. Let's continue, shall we? We're at the part of the lecture where she said the only certainty is uncertainty, and we are not tackling this with accuracy. It's very fragile. The last part was paraphrased. Sorry. I'm a mimicker, so I apologize if I ever make a weird accent when I'm listening to somebody. I am known for being like, please don't have an accent on the phone, because then what's happening is it's not me trying to be rude. It's my brain instantly wants to mimic. And I once spoke to somebody who was like, had a thick Texas accent, and I started mimicking her, and I'm like, she's like, oh, where are you from? And I'm like, oh, I'm from Washington. And then she's like, oh, I didn't realize I had an accent there. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm a mimicker. I dip into things without realizing it, and it's kind of like an impossibility for me. I was worried about it happening at the worst moment possible, and so I apologize if you find this offensive. I didn't mean to do this. It just happened. But the thing that I really liked about what she said is the only certainty is uncertainty. It is a huge principle of mindfulness. When we think about the future, all we're ever going to get is anxiety, because we will never know what will actually happening, and we will never have the ability to go back and change the past. So that uncertainty of could we have done that better will always make us depressed, because we're comparing it to like these two states of beings that we will never ever get to. We will only always be in the present. And so to acknowledge that there's so much uncertainty and to like thrive in it is scary. And I feel like maybe the point of this lecture, because it says the gift and power of emotional courage, is recognizing the power and love you have to show for yourself to just stay in the moment and have the courage to face whatever comes to you instead of trying to prep for everything, because we will never know what's going to happen. It will either occur or it won't. All we can do is do our best, which kind of speaks to the heart of improv, which is the beauty of improv. And the reason why it's so funny is it's all about being on your toes and being ready to adapt at a moment's notice. It's about actually seeing somebody and hearing their suggestions and not caring whether or not your joke is funnier than their joke, but going with it. And so you build something beautiful together rather than trying to bulldoze and take over a whole scene. You're like, oh, I didn't have that in mind, but what can I do to support them? That's why I think the beauty of improv is it's all about supporting each other on stage. And there are people you can do improv with that you don't actually like, you don't actually resonate with, but you actually are capable of making these great forms of art because you recognize that you are two entirely different people, which I find to be really, really beautiful. Let's continue with the uncertainty of how this lecture will end. It is what it is. That's a huge thing in mental health. She just said normal emotions like sadness and anger are now only seen through the lens of good or bad, and most people push those emotions into the bad category. I recognize that there is danger in being angry, especially if you're somebody who anger isn't just an emotion, it's a physical movement, it's a reaction. You punch things or it becomes violent. I have never experienced that kind of anger. But the thing I would caution against is trying to block out those emotions, because humanity is all about our capability to experience emotion, and all emotions are valid. When we try to block them out, that's when we're giving space for them to become too powerful for us. And there are a lot of people who think that emotions are not something that they have to worry about. Like, oh, no, they'll control it. They're in control. And I'm like, there is such thing as conscious and subconscious emotions. When you are consciously angry, you can control it. If you become subconsciously angry, that doesn't mean you're asleep. What it means is you're experiencing an emotion and you don't understand why. And when it's subconscious, if you don't understand why and it's just boiling, you will do things without really realizing why you're doing them. And that's why it's important to check in on yourself, not just others, so you recognize what emotions you're feeling. All emotions are valid, and when you allow every emotion to have its moment in the present, it will last smaller amounts of time every time, because it's no longer being avoided, it's having its moment. And listen, we all want to have our moment on stage, you know? So if anger has its moment, it will bow and get out of the way faster. Like, maybe anger doesn't need to be the last showstopper emotion, but it needs to be at least seen, you know? I don't need to be the showstopper, but I want to make sure I'm at least seen by a crowd of people, you know? And that's kind of what I feel like she's getting at, is emotional courage could also be just having the courage to show emotion without feeling shame about it, because that is a part of life. Positive is also a thing she's not talking about, and she used the example of people with cancer are told just to stay positive. And this is because there's a science backing up. Supposedly, this could be propaganda. Supposedly there's science that says if you remain positive, you are more likely to push through because you aren't getting lost to your diagnosis. And because she's like, we give power to being positive because that seems to be the end all be all. We have to be positive with other people. We can't ever show true emotion. And I think there is more power in being honest than there is by creating a false narrative. As somebody who has always lied up till recently about whether or not he's fine, I will say that I am notorious for having a smile on my face. I was even told in school that I had a voice that I am still trying to change. Not because I have a problem with where it's sitting, it's because it's still my positive voice. I'm trying to make sure that when I speak, it's really me. It's not the, oh, I'm really happy. This is a very personal, high pitched. It doesn't seem threatening. But is it actually me, or is it what I learned to make sure I'm invisible, not a problem, always perceived as happy? Make sure that you're not just being positive as a mask for what you actually are experiencing. Happy people can be miserable inside because they're putting on a front. Make sure you're not putting on a front. Your positivity and your happiness is your true experience, you know? So she's talking about rigid deniability. And one of the examples she uses is the fact that there's such rigid deniers about climate change, even though we're watching the ice caps melt. That's her example, not mine. But the reason I like this is because she's like, it's not just about that. There's also rigid deniability in families, with like society. Like, we deny things so hard until we ignore the truth about what's happening right underneath our noses. And there's so much truth in that, with the fact that, like I said, I was talking about my dad earlier, rigid deniability with our relationship. He denied anything having to do with my childhood, but he's the one who raised me, and he wouldn't let me have a conversation about like the trauma I experienced by living with him. I mentioned before the thing they told me about like my stepmother saying she wanted nothing to do with me. Before he even asked her to get married, he told me that that was her condition, and he chose to go on anyways. And that's what messed me up. I didn't even get to say that to him because he wouldn't let me speak. He originally denied ever having anything to do with a poor childhood. And when I started to try to give examples about what happened to me actually, like for instance, when a grown adult that we were living with kind of attacked me, my dad was completely on their side, and the only reason he forced that person to leave was because I got my mother and her sister and her husband involved. Otherwise, I don't think that he would have done that, because he made it very clear that he didn't actually agree with what I was saying. And so that was another thing I tried to bring up, but he's just like, well, there's no point talking about that because that's in the past and I have no connection to that. So it doesn't matter. And I was like, well, the past you can't go back to, but these are things I'm bringing up so you have context with what screwed me up as a child. And you're saying it doesn't matter. And then you're saying that didn't happen because that was also said. So you're making me feel like the truth is, it's like a way to gaslight somebody into believe they're going crazy. For instance, for some odd reason, because that made no sense to me, my dad tried to gaslight me into believing that I never owned a PS2 before, which made no sense because he went into my room and removed it and took it out, but he didn't do the follow-up step of removing all like the games I had for it. So then I'm like, okay, even if you're trying to gaslight me, because he did, he was like, you never owned a PS2, I don't know what you're talking about, which is why I was like, there are a lot of things that were happening that it was like you were trying to make me think I was crazy. But like these are all things that he was such a rigid denier about. He wouldn't just let me have a conversation. He would deny even before I even said anything for the conversation. And that's more of what got to me, is I was like, I'm trying to have a better relationship with you, but you're not even allowing me to speak my truth. Even when I came out to him, he rigid denied that. He's like, no, you're not. I was like, how would you know? You're not even me. You don't know my reality, but you're not even allowing me to express myself. And you say it's all made up in my head and all this other things. And I'm like, again, another example of you just gaslighting and being a rigid denier rather than letting me actually express my truth. Another thing she says is that research has shown that when emotion, any kind, is pushed aside or ignored, it grows stronger. I feel like the biggest example of this is a panic attack. This is a fear. Usually it's a trigger response based on something that we've been fearing for so long that our bodies start to react to something, and then it can make us feel like we're having a heart attack because they have similar things, but it was a panic attack. And usually at the core of it, it's because we're ignoring something that's either off, or we feel scared and we don't know why, or like a lot of times like leading up to like a huge thing, like maybe a speech. I don't really have that kind of thing where I don't mind giving a speech when need be. This is also my point about suicide in general. I feel like a lot of reasons why those numbers are going up is because even though it's 2023, even though we have so many shows out that are now actually talking about it, because one thing I feel like needs to be, I don't mind when there are shows that have suicide in it, but I feel like we need to change the narrative out there. Like new shows should have more and more how to help or how to speak about it, because I feel like it's a trope now in most media where like, and if you introduce the topic of suicide, that person then ends up dying. And a lot of times it doesn't feel like you're trying to address the topic and like the issues involving the subject. You're just trying to use it as a trope. And that's more when I get upset, because there is such real issues involving it when we use it just to like tell a story rather than to be like, here's the story. But the biggest thing in the story is the fact that if they just took a moment to actually check in or talk to somebody or express their true emotions, they might have found the help they needed, which was kind of like my main through line of the Flyaway Girl. Was we had somebody who was going through so much, and then we had two people who are basically the poster child of what we as a society like to believe is the okay people who do it, which I know it's never okay to do it, but it's like a thing where like, oh, well, they had a reason, or, oh, well, yeah, no, duh. It's like one of those things. And like the whole point is we tackle again what people think is the okay way. Again, never okay. But the whole point was if this person had just opened up, if they had just spoken about what's going on with them, things might have ended differently. But because they were so worried about being perceived a different way, or because they believed the narrations going inside of their head rather than the reality of the people around them, they decided to take their own life. Because there are so many ways to live in this world that when we're surrounded by toxic people, we think that that's how the entire world is, when one of the solutions might be that you just need to leave the environment that you're in and start over somewhere else. And if that happens to you, know that you're good, you're fine. It's beautiful to start over if you're starting over to have a better life. That's why I believe in the same concept that she's talking about, where because we're told not to talk about it, it grows and festers until we have so much going on inside of us, and it pushes us into action. Again, that's when I'm like, if you're even thinking about it and you're thinking about doing action, call somebody for help. If you don't have friends or family, call the suicide prevention hotline. With that, let's continue, but don't let emotions fester. Experience them when they first start, because I guarantee if you just experience emotion like the second it happens, it will be 1,000 times less powerful than waiting a week, 2 weeks to finally allow yourself to feel that emotion, because then you're feeling that emotion over the course of 2 weeks of suppressing it. So it has more oomph to give you. I love it when she says internal pain always comes out, but who comes the price? Who comes the price? Who pays the price? Is it you? Is it your children? Is it somebody at work? There's a thing to be said about generational pain or generational trauma, or also the abuse pipeline, the bullying pipeline. When somebody bullies you at home because you can't stand up to them, you bully somebody at school, and because you're bullying that person then bullies somebody else to feel like they might have some power. It's like a pipeline of bullying. It's kind of the same thing, where even though you're not addressing it, you might be pushing something you're unaware of on somebody else because you don't want to face something, so that internalized pain comes out in other ways that you may not be aware of. Gosh, so much like nuggets going on in this talk right now. She says, when we push aside everything going on inside of us, we lose the opportunity to address things as they happen right there. And so basically, we lose the ability to address the world as it is, because it's okay to be positive, but you can't be positive by sacrificing the reality of what's going on. If something is, I do feel like there's something to be said about trying to figure out how to change things in a positive way, because obviously if you do something in the means of trying to change something, but it's still through a negative like lens, the change you get may not be the change you're wanting. And that's why it's important to take things as they are rather than how you might want to perceive them, because again, checking in is important, because what you perceive may not be the reality. Like, for instance, in America, because I don't know where you're listening to this, we have a huge issue with gun violence, especially in schools. And a lot of times it feels like when this comes up, people keep trying to do things with just guns, lobbyists, and like, oh, we want to take away things. And I'm like, I feel like what's happening is we're getting so swept up in the politics of stuff, we're forgetting the basic thing that has to be changed, which is the fact that deniability. People are denying what's happening at school because usually as a result of people going to school for this to happen, something negative happened to these children who are deciding to do this. Usually there is some people who are just out to hurt people for no reason, but that I feel like usually somebody has a motivation, and not everyone that does it is like, oh, who just instantly is like, oh, you know, be fun today, let me just go, take out my schoolmates. No, gosh, I'm gonna do a trigger warning for this episode at the end of this episode. But the biggest thing I would say for this is something that I have said with DBT, or I feel like most schools all across the country, since learning DBT, there are so many skills that I feel like if I had just been told this or taught this as a child in school, I would have had better resources, better tools to deal with children, my peers, because a lot of times, especially, we push in school that the perception that our peers have of us is the reality of who we are, when it's not. Character is something I love, because character is not how people perceive you, it's how you truly are. Integrity, especially, is also doing the right thing even when nobody is watching. So for us to be able to know how to handle things that are like bullying, especially because a lot of times, because I've been reading a lot of Am I the Jerks, and some of them have to do with schools and nobody listening to children as they're being bullied. And I'm like, okay, at what point the step, not this, we need a new school system for this district? Because you should, as a student, be able to go to the principal, the vice principal, the counselors, your teachers, and ask them for help and ask them to stop a situation that's happening. When you are in school, especially in high school and middle school, because in elementary school, you're usually with the same class all day, but I feel like I don't understand why it's not a common thing if you're constantly having conflict with this, like the same kids. Why isn't it more common to just change that student into another class, to have them be separate from this person who's always bullying them? Yes, you can't do it constantly. Eventually you might have to like move to another school, but it feels like a lot of kids are like, oh, if I have any conflict, I must move to another school, when the solution should be, no, you have a peer system, you guys go to recess, maybe the issue is just you're around that person too much, and so we'll change you to another class and see if that helps you. But because I feel like deniability is what the huge issue of gun violence, and it's the fact that to fix gun violence, we need to fix how schools run, especially public schools in general, and most of it has to do with we are not taught, and as adults, how to handle our mental health properly, and therefore how are we to expect our children to handle their trauma in school properly. And that's why I feel like DBT, these skills that I'm teaching to you, are the tools I'm trying to convey that you can try. I don't understand why they're not tools that you learn alongside a PE class, or maybe we should just have something specifically for mental health, because we have physical education for physical health. Why isn't there a mental health? Spiritual health, I understand, because we're separating, unless you go to a Christian academy or a Catholic academy or any of those kind of things, usually you have a degree of separation, which I don't think is a bad thing, because also mental health, you can teach mental health without having to get into a specific religion. And you can even say these are tools that you can then take into your religion, because there is a spirituality is a part of mental health, but it isn't my decision how you handle your spirituality. It's all individualistic based. Because I feel like if I had learned all these skills as a child, even though bullying might have existed still, I would have been better prepared to separate it from me as a person. Because as an adult, when I went into the partial hospitalization program, I learned and I became aware of this black cloud that had formed. And like, I am somebody who has visually, I see people when I do memories or I think of things, I see visuals. And sometimes that comes to also along with audio. And so it's harder to separate, like, these aren't my thoughts. These are things that like I heard from people, when I can hear their voices still saying this stuff. And it's like, you have to learn how to train yourself to differentiate what thoughts are actually you, Cameron, and what thoughts are actually trauma trying to keep happening on you. Because that actually opened a whole new door for me, because I'm like, oh, not all thoughts are me. Some thoughts are just my brain, because my brain is conditioned to think a certain way. It wants to keep sending me more and more trauma, because it's like, oh, Cameron's too happy. Let's send him some thoughts from this black cloud to make him depressed today. It's like, the more you work on it, the more you become aware of your brain and the way it works and whether or not something's actually valid or not, because you're more aware. And I feel like as children, we're taught to be aware of those emotions, we'll be more capable of handling them. And I feel like that's a path that might lead to a better school system where we don't have this stuff happening. Because I do think like certain things make sense for restrictions for gun violence, but I think that the major thing that needs to be changed is just the part of mental health that also contributes to the same problem. But again, these are my thought, not anybody else's. So take them, leave them. It's just something that I feel like would have helped me as a child, and I hope it would help other children as well. Sorry, it's weird for me to laugh in the next clip that you see me, that she just said, oh, somebody was complaining to her about all these things that they didn't want to feel. And she said, oh, I'm sorry, you have dead people goals. And I have never felt so seen, so heard from somebody. I cannot tell you the amount of goals I started listening to myself. And I'm like, you realize to go through life and experience no like obstacle, no trauma, no pushback is to basically not live at all, because we are all individualistics. We all have different opinions. We all have different ways of viewing the world. To experience life together, we have to be okay with different perspective. And then somebody said, I want to try, but I don't want to be rejected, or I don't want to fail. But failure is a part of life. To fail is to live. And I'm like, you have dead people goals. And I'm like, that is literally the epiphany I had that started pushing me to do more and more with my mental health. Is like, all the things that I'm telling myself I want every day are things that you want because how you remain the robot, how you remain the steel statue that stays there perfectly safe until you die. And I don't want to be safe until I die. I want to live life fully and be happy and experience new things. But again, never been more seen or heard than in this talk right now. Gosh, I keep being seen and I am not prepared for it. She says, rigid acceptance or radical acceptance is the cornerstone to truly, I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't know all the words she said. Basically, you have to have radical acceptance of all your emotions emotions in order to truly feel them and actually have everything you need to have a full life. When we deny them, we limit the life we're living. Again, I'll paraphrase. God, I used to think of my radical acceptance of an emotion as a flaw because it seemed like nobody I knew had the ability to do the same thing because they were all trying to deny the emotions they were having, or they're trying to judge an emotion because they felt like they shouldn't be having it at this moment, or that it wasn't worthy of being felt. And I'm like, no, you're feeling this emotion. Do you know what it's about? The questions you're asking are not the correct questions because you're questioning whether or not you should be allowed to have the emotion, rather you should be questioning what is causing the emotion. Is it something that I can change, or is it something that I just need to get through? Because we have emotions that we're never going to actually change them from going away, because like grief is one that we have to rationally accept because it comes with loss, and we can't fight that because it will come out in other ways that might be more unhealthy. But again, just like accepting grief gave me so much freedom. We're coming up on like the anniversary of my mother's death, and I feel it subconsciously, and I know that because around this time is when I start feeling a little luggish. That's the word. I just start feeling a little luggish. I start feeling like it's a little harder to get through like the air, and it is because I am physically feeling that still, but emotionally I have a very different outlook about where people go after they die. And like I had the epiphany that my mom was suffering a lot because she was using a lot, and the way she passed some people might think of as tragic because she passed in a bathroom, and they discovered her like I guess while she was in a position that implied she was puking. And you could be swept up in the detail. At the same time, I'm like, well, she's been in a lot of pain for a very long time, and even though I wanted more time with her and I wish she had treated herself better so I could have had that, I accepted the reality of what happened. And so I'm still experiencing the loss, but I'm not angry or sad or, in denial about it, if that makes sense. Overall, I just wish she had been more educated and had been more proactive with her mental stuff. And by that, it's not necessarily that I think that she should have been better, because it takes a while to get through addiction. But I wish that what I mean by active is in the Twin Cities, they have tons of advertising going around that if you are somebody who's going to make the choice to do drugs, then you need to make sure that you're somebody who has the tool to save themselves if they're overdosing. One, I wish my mom had been educated about the dangers of fentanyl and the fact that a lot of drugs are being laced with it, which is why like deaths by fentanyl have been growing in the country. But also two, I wish she'd been educated enough to ask the question and tell her doctor, is there something that will help me if I overdose? Because I feel like that would have been a huge thing. And I feel like that kind of step would have saved her. I want to have the same conversation with my sister and just ask her if she's getting clean, but if not, has she gone to a doctor to actually ask for those tools? Because I don't want her to die because of her choice. I would rather she figured her life out, and if she needed that tool until she became clean enough to not need it anymore. God, I'm gonna have to. This is gonna be a huge. Sorry, I've gone from all over the spectrum, but it's kind of like, again, this week episode every month might be very heavy because it's me working through my own trauma, and I'm being seen, and I'm also realizing that there are things that happen as a consequence with not being open and honest about where you truly are. Because if my mother and my sister were being open and honest about what they were actually doing, they would have the forethought to have these tools in case it went bad. I hope because of what happened with my mother, my sister has done this, but my sister stopped paying for a phone and I have no access to call her anymore. And last I checked, she was homeless. And that scares me, but I don't have any way of changing that right now. In the future, maybe I could help her more, but I don't have any resource for that. And any energy that she'd send my way, I'd be like, I'm okay if we check in on each other, but really, I can't repeat this enough. While I want a relationship, I don't want a relationship until she sends all her energy towards her children. And if she has enough energy after to have a relationship with me, that's great. But I'm of the opinion, if you bring children into the world, they should be one of your main priorities. And I don't know if she's of the same opinion. I hope it is because she has children, but that's how I feel. Gosh, it is what it is. Sorry, I'm starting to get a little emotional, but let's move on. Another thing she says is acceptance and accuracy matter. That is why I'm a huge component, or somebody who tells people, I think it's component. If I get upset with somebody, or if I have a perception of anything, I will stop before I truly let an emotion come out to make sure that, one, I have the awareness of the emotion, but I want to make sure before I release it, or I've actually like push my emotion onto somebody else, that what they said is actually what they were trying to say, and I'm not mishearing it because of some trauma that's being triggered. Because if I'm going to be angry with somebody, I want to make sure I'm angry with the reality of them and not angry because my trauma triggered me and I'm now going to like choose somebody out because of something that they have nothing to do with. So acceptance and accuracy is a pivotal part of that, because you want to make sure you know the truth of any situation. So something that she's saying now is that emotions are data, and then the way we react to that data we're collecting is everything to do with the conversation that you have with yourself, where you say, what are my core values? Because the reason why you're having an emotion such as rage is usually because something is happening that goes against your core values, which is why she used the example of the news. You would not be angry at the news if what was happening didn't go against your values. And then for me, I feel like there needs to be an allowance between what is something to be raged at that we need to change for everyone, and what is something that the basic thing that we need. Since she's from South Africa, but I'm in America, we were founded on the fact that like there should be a separation of religion and state, because the freedom of religion means there's also freedom without religion. And like that's what people sometimes forget. Something that I wish happened more was people would stop and be like, oh, I'm hearing this other person's religious stuff that they believe. I'm okay with letting them practice this and like do this in their settings because that's their environment that they're in. But I need to be okay with them existing in their environment and me existing in mine, and not assuming that I have a right to push my like views on them at all. Like you should listen to people and you should try to come to compromises, but you shouldn't try to eliminate the way they think. I don't think that's a healthy way to make the world. I think the best thing that we can do is hear everyone out and try to make the world a place where all beliefs can find like an equilibrium. And I feel like that's the world that would be the best for everyone. But that's the optimism in me speaking. I understand that that's more simple than it actually would be in reality. Oh my gosh, epiphany after epiphany in this one, guys. We make I am statements, and she said, well, you are not your emotion. Your emotion, you are you, and your emotion is a data source. It's something to collect so you can consider them. It is not something that actually is you. It's your job to cipher through what that emotion is trying to tell you, but it is by no means you actually as a person. Gosh. I'm shocked that I am getting so much from this. Oh man, because I know this, but I've never heard it in such a concise, clear way. And I feel like the second you realize that, the faster you will be at being able to adapt your experience, because you'll know the difference between what is reality and what is a perception that's happening. You know, like trying to recognize the difference between who you are really and what your emotion is trying to tell you are, because they are two entirely different things. Something that I already said, but I want to highlight again that she says is, what action can I take from here that will lead me closer to my values? What actions can I take from here that will take me away from my values? I'm repeating that because I think that's a big thing that we all need to have with ourselves. Sit down, have a conversation, and get down to the core of what you believe. Because when you know that, you can start to recognize what decisions you're making that are going against who you are, and what decisions are going against who you are. I might have repeated myself. I'm going to say for or against, or going towards or away from who you are. Because when you find that clarity, it makes it a lot easier to be who you are, because then you'll know whether or not you're actually getting upset, or whether or not somebody's trying to shame you to get upset. Because just because somebody else has a core value does not mean that you have to. And you can recognize, okay, let me consider this because they were so angry and upset. Do I actually feel like that's something that I need to be sorry about? If you get to the conclusion after going through all your core values that it isn't, then it's not up to you to make that up to that person. They can be upset if they want, but if you don't have anything that's telling you that what they said is like actually justified in your core values, so then you feel guilt, because guilt is justified, shame is not. If you feel guilty, that's when you should go and apologize or make amends and do that thing. But that's why I thought that was important to re-highlight. So she finished the talk, and she ends it by saying Sarabana. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I'm sorry if I'm not. But the thing that she highlighted at the end was, we all want to be seen, and we greet others by saying hello, and in their culture saying, I see you, and because I see you, you exist, or you are here. Gosh, it's been a minute since I saw the beginning of this because I've been so blown away by this talk. I mentioned the fact about in Avatar, it was like he was waiting for his father to see him to know that he had his plate. And what I love about how she ended it quote was, when you finally see you and say, because I see you, you are here, you will finally know the reality and the real person, the real human behind everything that is going on in your head. And it's funny how we can want to be seen by others, but we often forget to see ourselves. And the idea of that is just so beautiful to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. And I would definitely recommend watching The Gift and Power of Emotional Courage on TED Talk by Susan David. There were so many good pivotal moments in that speech. And I didn't think I'd be blown away today, but I was blown away moment after moment. And there is such beauty in understanding who we are as a person. Again, seeing ourselves and not not seeing ourselves in a judgmental way, just seeing ourselves as the reality of who we are. We all have things that we excel at. We all have things that we fail at. And in order to make a positive out of failure, you have to accept that you fail so that you can do small little things that will improve the skills that you lack in, so you don't fail the same ever. Because if you fail the same way, that's when I feel like that's a negative. But if you fail and you've tried something different, you're learning how to be successful through all that failure. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. I really, again, blew my mind, and I hope that I can do this more for you guys in the future. I enjoyed going through this and talking about myself. And that's why this episode is a little longer than the rest, because I was having moments and I was having discoveries and I was realizing my own flaws and things that I've been holding on to, which is the point of this talk, is for me to discover more about myself. Because again, I opened every episode by saying going on my own mental health journey. And I was like, well, I want to make sure that you see some of that, because otherwise it's me putting on a face, and that's not what I want to do. I want you guys to know that this is somebody else who has that struggle, and he's just trying to make sure that you know that you're not alone and that you are seen. With that, as we move towards closing the episode, I would love it if you guys, anywhere, if you guys are listening to this on a podcast system, I'd love it if you would go and leave a review and comment. I love reading them, and it helps just push this to more people, so more people can be seen or start discovering ways to be seen. Because really all I want to be is the spark starts them on that journey. And if you are watching this on YouTube and the video version, hey, what's up? Direct eye contact, I know, can be hard for some people, but I'm looking into a camera lens, so maybe that's why it's easier for me. Also, if you are watching on YouTube, you can hit that subscribe button and push the bell button if you want to get notified when I post more videos. I hope you guys enjoy them. I enjoy making these for you. And also you guys can leave likes and comments, and we can have a very healthy back and forth. I try to make sure that I stay positive, or I try to give feedback in a way that wants you to succeed, because that's what I feel all feedback should be, is how can I help this person to succeed? If that's not part of what I'm saying, then I won't say it, because I'd rather you know you are seen and get whatever benefit you can than me say something that would be against you and your success. At least that's how I view it. Hopefully you guys have a wonderful week. I can't wait to see you guys next week. Thank you guys so much. As always, don't forget to show up for yourself, because you matter. All right. Bye guys.